You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and it is that time again of the week. We are doing power rankings following week 8 of the UFL, heading into week number 9 now. We just have 2 weeks left in the regular season before playoff time, and we get closer and closer to figuring out who our UFL championship will be. That being said, I invite you all, comment down below. Want to hear your thoughts on this past weekend's games? What are your thoughts on my power rankings? What are your power rankings as we head into week number 9? But we'll dive right into it, beginning with the team that sits at the very bottom of the UFL. I've had them here now for, I would say, very close to almost 2 months at this point, and I don't see that changing at any time, and that is going to be the Memphis Showboats here. Now sitting at 1-7, losing 24-18 this past weekend. It's basically just like another week, another loss over in Memphis, and things have just continued to get uglier and uglier as the weeks have gone by. Case Cook is ultimately going down with an injury in this game behind an offensive line that honestly feels like it's becoming a historically bad kind of pass protection unit, and I have no idea how things are going to shake out these next couple of weeks if Josh Love is the quarterback, but I will give him some credit. He came in, he finished off a drive for 6, ultimately led a nice long 15-play drive for another 3 points as well. So credit to him for coming in, especially unexpected, and stepping in for the offense and making some things happen for them. But despite all of that, the offensive line woes just kind of continue to grab this team by the throat, and there's nothing really they can do about it. They were able to run for about 40 yards on the day, averaging just 2.5 yards per attempt. The offensive line issues have crippled this team's offense to an extent that is kind of insane to see at this point in the season. You would have thought that maybe we would have seen some shuffling around, maybe some signings and cuts to kind of retool this offensive line. And I understand, the complexities of an offensive line and how hard it is to get 5 guys to work together, especially throwing them in. But I would have just expected to see maybe some more shuffling than we've seen from them. But unfortunately, it just does not seem like there's anything in the well to maybe improve the unit. So it's unfortunate the way this offense has kind of found itself. It's been in a very tough spot all season long. I don't foresee that changing the next couple of weeks, but it really is unfortunate the way that's kind of shaked itself out. Defensively, it was not much better. Kind of in a hell of a situation trying to stop Michigan's 2 quarterback / rushing attack that they had going on there. Even with Wes Hills going down early in that matchup, it did not really matter. Bryce Perkins managed 55 yards on the ground, which was a problem. They had no idea how to contain Bryce Perkins at any point when he was opting to run with the football. Matt Colburn racked up another 93 yards and a couple of rushing touchdowns as well, basically took over as running back 1 and running back the entire way through after we lost Wes Hills early in the matchup. And then, beyond that, it could not really do a whole lot to pressure the quarterbacks. They could not really stop what they were doing. Both quarterbacks wound up throwing for a touchdown and nearly 100 yards apiece. Overall, just they continue to crash and burn over in Memphis, and to top it all off, you finish the game 13 penalties, 103 yards. You're averaging 10.1 yards per penalty or 10 yards per penalty, something like that. Some ridiculous number. What are you going to do? I don't really know. I don't know what the answers are for Memphis, but there is going to be a long offseason of changes I would expect for the Showboats. Going into number 7, we have ourselves the Houston Roughnecks, and at 1-7 with a tough 35-28 loss, a gritty loss, I would have to say. I want to give some major credit for the Roughnecks in this one here, because you can come into this matchup, you have nothing to play for. All you can really do is put some game tape on if you are guys on this roster and just try to show off what you can do in hopes that maybe it flashes somewhere and someone from the NFL, maybe catches you on film somewhere and opts to bring you on for a tryout during the training camp portion of the offseason that's coming up soon for the NFL. But major credit for this team to come in and do what they did, because even with Reed Sinnett throwing an interception right off the bat on the opening drive, this team never quit. They found a rhythm on offense, one that I don't think we've seen all. The crazy thing is that you're going up against Birmingham, and we got the best offensive performance out of the Houston Roughnecks all season long. This is the crazy thing about this whole situation here. Finally finding success running the football. ball, we're looking at 135 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns for Houston altogether. We saw time being split between quarterbacks Reed Sinnett and Nolan Henderson, and it really felt like Houston came into this game and was like, we're just going to basically do everything in our power to maybe catch Birmingham off guard in a situation or two where we might be able to surprise them. And I think they did a solid job in doing that. Unfortunately, the thing that really hindered this team from pulling this off was just the inability of being able to stop just all the talent that is on Birmingham's roster. It doesn't even matter if they're missing players going into this game, in which CJ Marable did not play. It does not even matter because they just have so many guys that can step in even when people are hurt and can contribute at a significant level at that. But I mean, from struggling to get Birmingham off the football field on third down, which they allowed, I believe, an 8 out of 12 conversion rate here, failing to stop Birmingham. They were perfect in the red zone, 5 for 5 on the day. They were not able to really bring enough pressure or even bring Adrian Martinez down even once in the matchup, not a single sack there. They managed a couple of takeaways, but you could not really stop what Birmingham was throwing at you on offense. And I mean, Adrian Martinez was just an absolute headache for this defense to deal with from start to finish. But again, I do want to throw that respect out to Houston because they came into a game where you're literally playing for nothing besides putting tape on film, and hats off, because there were a couple of points in that game, especially late. Things got a little tight, and I'm sure some Stallions fans, they'll probably act like, no sweat off our brow, undefeated still, 8-0. I get it, but there were probably a few people sitting there twiddling their thumbs wondering why the Houston Roughnecks were keeping this game as close as they were, because that one was probably a little too close for comfort for Birmingham, and this was a very near massive upset, one that would have probably shattered, I think, any other upset we have seen to this point in spring football since the USFL and XFL have found themselves back in the fold. Going into number 6, we are looking at the Arlington Renegades, who fell 20-15, and honestly a tough loss to swallow, I would say, considering just how many opportunities, especially late, that you had to potentially pull off the comeback and win this football game, especially how bad things kind of started early. I mean, the stats might look good post-game for some of the players in this one here, but stats don't win you games, and beyond the good stats, that was pretty much all that there was good. Like, yes, you could point to Luis Perez's 200 yards and a couple of touchdowns on the day, but the team could not run the football very effectively aside from like a single one big 21-yard run. I mean, and then when you look at just the way this game ended for this offense, disaster was the word that kind of popped up into my head as I'm like reviewing all of this stuff here. 2 of your final 3 drives, that third drive being the one good thing that came out of the ending of this game for you. That's the first of the 3 drives. You get the ball back. This is coming after a 3-and-out from your defense in a really good spot. I believe like 9:44 left on the clock in the third quarter. Plenty of time and a really good opportunity. Just to swing the entire momentum of the game in your favor. A holding call kind of kills the drive. You end up going nowhere. Doesn't amount to anything. You have to punt the football away. Then what happens? Your defense bends, doesn't break, sets up a field goal. The field goal is missed. All right, here's your chance now. We got to score a touchdown here. What happens? 11 plays, 47-yard drive, turnover on downs. You can't punch the football in. You can't even come away with 3 points. That does not help you either. And then, of course, following that, you get the football back one last time. You, of course, score the touchdown, but too little, too late. It does not matter. You had 3 drives that you needed to come away with points in to wrap up the game, and it took you until that third drive to come away with the points, and it was not enough regardless. Just a bit of a disaster, I would say, late in the game for Arlington. Again, with how many opportunities. You basically are looking at 3 chances that you were given, and you only could capitalize on 1. You got a 3-and-out, a missed field goal, and another missed field goal that finally amounted in a touchdown after that third mistake from San Antonio's part late in the game. And all of this is not to forget to mention, that your defense in this point of the game has allowed 0 points in the entire second half here. Your defense, after a really tough first half, I'm not going to sit here and ignore that. It was a very ugly first half, but after a really tough first half, they turn things around in the second. They do not allow a single point on the board. If you want to argue the 6 potential points that could have been on the board had San Antonio not missed a field goal, like sure, but ultimately they missed. You find yourself where your defense is finally playing well here again, and you just can't come away with anything. It was a really frustrating second half of the game for Arlington, who felt like they were being given opportunities and they just could not take them for whatever the reason may be. But I don't want to sit here and blame like the first half on the defense and the second half on the offense. Like, I feel like both sides definitely shoulder the blame. The offense definitely had some moments early in the game where they just could not seem to figure it out, and then the defense was basically strong in the second half. When the offense, it felt like there was never a point where everyone was on the same page, and that was kind of the big issue here. But and this is kind of the story of Arlington, if they could just put it all together at the same time. This is a team that I still believe is better than their 1-7 record. However, with just the amount of blown opportunities and, one side getting hot while the other can't really do anything, they kind of looked every bit of 1-7 this past week, which is, again, I hate that, because this is a team that could very well be 3-5, maybe 4-4, battling it out for a spot in the XFL playoffs. But here they are at 1-7, dropping a game where you literally had 3 opportunities and could only capitalize once to potentially steal this football game away from San Antonio. So you're here now, 1-7, number 6 in the UFL for me. Coming in now at number 5, we have ourselves the DC Defenders, in a gotta-have-it situation where you need to win this football game to keep your playoff hopes alive and complicate things further for the St. Louis Battlehawks. What do you do but come out and fumble away your opportunity at doing just that? The offense, again, and you're going up against a St. Louis team that's missing their quarterback and 2 significant wide receivers on the offense here. Your offense comes in, turns the ball over a total of 4 times, 2 times via St. Louis taking the football away, another 2 times via turnovers on downs. Your offense just cannot stay on the field and cannot consistently get the ball to the end zone or even in position to score points without throwing your opportunities away. Jordan Te'amu has himself I would say, kind of typical game for what has been his entire season at this point, barring like a game and a half. 23 of 40, so just around 55% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 196 yards. And while that yardage number is nice, you have the 2 interceptions that basically threw a couple of those drives away. That has been the story for Te'amu for pretty much the majority of this season. I feel like it's been a 50-50 toss-up as to whether a play is going to end well or end really badly with DC. And it's one of those things where I don't really want to throw all the blame on Te'amu, because I feel like this offense and the way they have things drawn up over there just relies way too much on him. And I understand you lost your star running back coming into this season before it even kicked off, but it almost feels like they don't even trust their running backs to run the football at this point here, which is bizarre, because I think DC has a pretty good offensive line and should be able to find some success running the ball if they just committed to doing so. You only let your running backs attempt to run the football 11 total times in that game here. It just feels like the over-reliance with DC on Jordan Te'amu and the success that, or not success, that he has during games is what's kind of killing this team at this point here. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and ignore the state of the defense as well, and just kind of the struggles that they've had basically all season, as well as they have been one of the worst defenses in a fair amount of statistical categories throughout the entirety of the year. But I mean, DC even got a solid effort from their defense. I wouldn't say like a great effort, but I would say a solid effort. I mean, for what it's worth, your defense came away with 4 sacks. Manny Wilkins only threw for 126 yards at like a 50% completion rate. I mean, yeah, there were situations where they had a hard time dealing with Wilkins and his scrambling and just trying to keep him contained. But I mean, that kind of is like that'll come with quarterbacks that aren't afraid to run the football. And on top of that, it's hard to play defense when your offense is turning the football over via interceptions and or just flat out turnovers on downs, or having a drive end in just 3 plays. I mean, your defense is going to be gassed. They're going to be put in a tough spots. And I mean, at some point you can only bend so much before you break. But this team has just had so many issues, and I feel like at this point here, the offense has even kind of started to catch up with just the defensive struggles that they've had here. And I'm starting to try to figure out, is it really all on the defense, or has it just been that like the offense puts them in such backbreaking situations that they wind up letting up so much? I don't really know what the actual answer is to all of that, but it's been very frustrating. And I think this past game was kind of the same exact thing, where you're relying too much on Te'amu, you're putting way too much weight on his shoulders, you're completely ignoring your running back room. Your defense is, of course, going to just bend and bend and bend until it eventually breaks come the end of the football game, where they can't do enough to put things away. And you get the result that DC is currently at right now, which is sitting at 3-5, knocked out of the playoffs at this point here, as both St. Louis and San Antonio now have punched their tickets to the XFL side of the playoffs now, and you're on the outside looking in. And everything I just kind of rattled off about will get you to this exact result here. One-dimensional offense, putting your defense in bad spots where the defense isn't already a strength and even struggled last year as well, and some of that carried over into this year, and you find yourself where you are now on the outside looking in because you don't have an offense that was just full of gas and was on fire last season. Now you're getting a more harsh reality of things. Coming in at number 4, as we move into the top half of the UFL, the playoff teams. San Antonio is the first one at number 4 here, 6-2 now with a 20-15 win. San Antonio not dead just yet, even though I was a little bit worried about them going into this matchup against Arlington. And again, as I mentioned while we were talking about the Renegades, they gave the Renegades some opportunities to potentially come back and steal that game from them. However, Quentin Dormady, I do want to tip my cap to him because he has been struggling as of late. Rewrote the script in Game 2 against Arlington following the first time that they played. Kind of a disaster of a game despite the fact that they won. He went 17 of 25, 320 yards through the air, couple of touchdowns to boot, both of those going to Anthony McFarland, who was an absolute stud with the football in his hand in open space here. I've got to say, Anthony McFarland is just an unbelievable talent. Like, for him to take just 3 passes and go 118 yards for a couple of scores, torching Arlington's defense, I mean, he made it look like Arlington's defense had never tackled a day in its life prior to this game here. It was kind of insane the way he was slipping through defenders, and it was just an incredible performance to watch altogether. On top of that, Cody Latimer himself had a great day as well. He had 6 catches, 116 yards. San Antonio jumped out to a 13-0 lead and honestly kind of never really looked back. And I mean, it's a shame that they didn't have more points on the board because you had a couple of missed field goals. This game could have been like 26-15, and it would have looked like a far more comfortable victory, and it wouldn't have been as tight as it was coming in late. But you got the job done. That's all that matters. But I mean, offensively, this was a great performance, and honestly one that I think San Antonio really needed, because I was really starting to get worried about where this San Antonio offense was heading. So for them to get a get-right game, albeit against the defense that has been pretty bad at certain times throughout the season in Arlington, this was the exact type of game you want to have as you're inching yourself closer to the playoffs, and a great way to also lock up your playoff spot as well. Defensively, another strong performance, and this was a game that didn't really have all the like flash and pizzazz I think you get from Austin, San Antonio's confusing Texas areas here, but not the flash and pizzazz you typically get from San Antonio's defense. It wasn't about the takeaways. It wasn't about like the racking up the sacks and what have you. They only had 2 on the day, which we've seen them get as high as 6 in a game or something like that before. It wasn't about all the flashy things. It was about just all the things that they did right, relying on their best players to be in the positions that they need to be. Guys like safety Jordan Mosley and linebacker Devontae Beckett, they racked up combined 17 total tackles just between the 2 of them, and that's been the status quo for those guys all season long, just tackle after tackle, being where the football is, always being in the right place at the right time to get Arlington off the football field, completely snuffing out the running game. I mean, minus a 21-yard Lindsey Scott run, the run game from Arlington was basically a non-factor against San Antonio's defensive front. So I mean, overall, this game defensively, it didn't have the flash and just all the disruption that you typically get from San Antonio. It was strictly just good defense, good players, in good spots at all the right times that you could possibly ask from them. And I think this is a great overall game. And again, you're 2 missed field goals away from this game really being far apart. Shaky stuff, but ultimately you got the job done. You knocked out an opponent that is in a far worse spot than you are, and you solidify your place in the XFL side of the playoffs. Coming in at number 3, we have ourselves the Michigan Panthers with a 24-18 win over the Memphis Showboats, now sitting at 6-2. The quarterback conversation has been very loud over the last few weeks in regards to just who is going to be the guy to take over, as we've seen now E.J. Perry and then Danny Etling, and now we're getting Bryce Perkins and Brian Lewerke. We have 4 different guys now that have taken snaps from Michigan, and I do feel like it'll be good for them to try to figure out who this guy is going to be as we now approach just the final 2 games of the regular season and a playoff matchup against the Birmingham Stallions. I will say, though, that I've been impressed with the offensive line and what they've been doing in the run game. The pass protection has not been perfect. I'm not going to sit here and act like it has been, but the way they are able to open things up in the run, no matter who's in the backfield, and all things considered, with Wes Hills going down, Matt Colburn still able to step in, still able to find success behind that offensive line to the tune of 93 yards and a couple of touchdowns. I think you really have to be impressed with what they're doing there, so I'm excited to see the progression there for the team. On top of that, Bryce Perkins, I'm starting to get a little bit curious. I think there might be a good chance that he potentially gets the nod to start next week, and he winds up being the guy going forward. When you just kind of look at what he's done, and on top of that, his past NFL experience, he might be the most well-suited guy to lead this team during this final couple of games and into the playoffs here, and however far that winds up taking them. I mean, he went 7 of 9. He had 106 yards and a passing touchdown as well. Had another 55 yards on the ground with his legs. Like, he's clearly a dual threat type of guy. He can make things happen. He can extend plays with his legs. I would be very curious to see how this team looks if it's just the Bryce Perkins show on offense going forward here. And I'm sure some Michigan fans out there would agree with me. So let me know. I would be very curious to see what this team looks like if we just settle on Bryce Perkins the rest of the way, because I'm starting to kind of wonder, and I'd be hard pressed to see anyone else keep the spot over him unless anyone's really sold on Danny Etling being the guy, or if maybe you have an argument for Brian Lewerke. But honestly, with what Bryce Perkins has been doing here, I kind of feel like he might be the guy that you want to stick with, because again, I don't really know how this like rotating through quarterbacks is going to work as you try to make yourself as you make your playoff push. It just doesn't really make sense to me. On the defensive side, though, defense looked pretty good. Had yourself a really nice, just I would say like team effort as far as defense goes. Finished the day with 4 total sacks, each sack coming from a different player. On top of that, a couple of big plays I wanted to point out. Cornerback Nate Brooks came away with an interception early, basically snuffing out Memphis's offense right out of the gates there, which wound up leading to like 4 straight drives of going absolutely nowhere for Memphis's offense. It totaled just 38 yards through those 4 drives there. And then late in the game, 3:39 left, forcing a punt after just 5 plays, shutting things down for Memphis that was trying to make a comeback and honestly pushed them back a yard. They didn't even end up going anywhere. And you end Memphis's day on offense. Michigan never lets them see the football again. This was a really good performance, I would say, from start to finish. You could say it was probably a little bit closer than you would have liked to see, given that like Memphis is considered widely now the worst team in the UFL, and there was that final muffed punt late to really kind of rattle things, and it was a little bit scary, don't get me wrong. When I saw that happen, I was like, dear God, don't let this be the way that like Michigan ends up throwing this football game away if something like that happens. And you can thank the football gods that the ball literally bounced in your direction. But overall, this is a good win, all things considered, with just losing Wes Hills. You're rotating through quarterbacks. Yes, you're going up against arguably the worst team in the UFL, but to come in and still get the victory here, all things considered, hats off to the Panthers here. I think that at this point now, I've had some questions regarding San Antonio's offense, which is why I have Michigan at 3, San Antonio at 4, and I think Michigan has kind of separated themselves as that clear number 3. But I'd love to hear what you have to think about that, but I really think I like Michigan at number 3. Coming in at the number 2 spot here, I've got to say, St. Louis Battlehawks, no A.J. McCarron, no Marcel Aitman, no Ja'Cour Pearson, no problem for this offense, did not even matter. Cornerback Manny Wilkins comes in and puts this game literally on his back. Like, the guy totaled for 205 yards, and I think the team finished with like 235 total yards of offense on the day. For him to come in and do that, with the situation being what it is, where you have a playoff berth on the line, the team you're playing is still fighting for that playoff spot in the XFL as well. This was one of those games where it took a couple of drives for St. Louis to kind of sort themselves out offensively, but once they did, you're looking at points in 5 of the next 6 drives after those first 2, and things looked pretty good. running the ball was a little tough for St. Louis, and kind of shocking considering just how bad DC has been against the run so far this year. But overall, it was like a tough, gritty game. And even with like the struggles, and you're only averaging 3.2 yards per carry, you still managed to punch in the football 3 times on the ground. This is one of those like grittier performances. It was not pretty by any means, but it was still effective, and you got the job done. You still came away with the victory. Considering the amount of players you have missing on offense, you battered, bruised, missing stars, it does not matter. And I think that goes to show you just how deep this St. Louis team is and why they are widely considered the second best team, and by some even potentially still the best team if you're a diehard St. Louis fan. But you got to give Manny Wilkins his flowers. You've got to give this entire coaching staff, Anthony Becht, all of them. Everyone deserves some flowers for this one here, because you have the playoffs here. You have an opportunity to lock up the berth and get home field throughout, or not home field throughout, but lock up a playoff spot. And home field is still on the line, is what I'm trying to say, with San Antonio also still sitting at 6-2. This was kind of a gotta-have-it win if you want to maintain that opportunity to have home field for the XFL Championship and the UFL Championship, because for those of you that may have forgotten, it's in St. Louis. This was a must-have type of win, and with so many things stacked against you, to come away victorious was massive. And the defense needs to get some love as well. I mean, there were some really big, impactful plays, and there were some moments where you were maybe a little bit worried about how the defense was doing, but I mean, 2 things that really stood out to me: interception from defensive back Cameron Kelly in the first quarter, killing an 11-play, 47-yard drive, massive for them. Talk about a huge takeaway there. And then there was a second interception later in the game from safety Quinterio Cole in the fourth. Led to 3 points, made the game 20-14 right after DC goes down and scores, but it puts you in a situation where you're up or you're down only 1, where you only need 3, but you wound up getting 6 anyways and ultimately sealed the victory there. And then the game on the line, St. Louis needs 5 plays, shuts down DC, walks away with a big victory here. This was a gritty performance, and a great one at that, for a team that was in such a bad spot going into this matchup here, and there was so much concern with just who was going to be missing in this game, and for all those players to still wind up missing and come away with a win. Again, gotta tip my cap to St. Louis, because that was a massive victory. No matter how you feel about DC as a team and where their struggles lie, that is a lot to overcome and still come away victorious. And I know there was a decent amount of people that were maybe counting St. Louis out because of all those injuries. I, myself, was not one of them, because I still had St. Louis winning regardless because of how deep they are as a team. And then finally, coming in at the number 1 spot, we've got ourselves the Birmingham Stallions winning 35-28 over the Houston Roughnecks. Let me say this. This game was a little too close for comfort. We'll start there. For a team that's undefeated, where they are and where the Houston Roughnecks are, this game probably should have never turned out the way it did. And I even talked about this in my preview of the matchup, about Birmingham going into this game here, not looking ahead. Don't underestimate your opponent, and don't just look past them because you're playoff bound, and that's kind of where your focus is probably at this very moment in the season, especially with the playoffs locked up the way they are right now. But there is a good chance that missing some of the key starters they had in this game may have affected things as well. Like, I don't want to just label this as this was a scenario of just looking past your opponent. I think that, when you think of guys that were missing, Carlos Davis, you also had Mark Gilbert out, you probably have to look at that and go, okay, so maybe there is some reason as to why things maybe played out the way they did. It's not like Birmingham didn't still have a ton of stars on the field, because the whole defense is littered with them, but some of the key cogs were missing from that wheel turning. And Houston had their best game running the football all season long against Birmingham's league best run defense, which was really surprising to me. 135 yards, 3 touchdowns allowed on the day. Very, very surprising. And then on top of that, Kiki Cudi and Justin Hall were basically the only 2 people really doing any damage through the air. Everyone else caught 1 singular pass, whereas Kiki Cudi and Justin Hall combined for 11 of the 15 completions that they had, for 153 of the 196 yards that they had through the air as an offense. So just a overall surprising performance, I would say. But again, there was injuries and things, but when you had to have it, Birmingham, as they typically do, got the job done. Big sack to end the final drive of the game from DeMarcus Gates. Big 3-and-out on Houston's second to last possession. I mean, there was just, when you needed to get things done, Birmingham's defense stepped up and got those things done. So tipping my cap to them, despite kind of finding yourself in what was a bit of a surprising situation there. You didn't crack under the pressure that basically Houston all of a sudden out of nowhere came with. And then offensively, At this point here, I don't really know if there's anyone else in line for the MVP award more than Adrian Martinez. I mean, 5 total touchdowns, 3 through the air, 2 on the ground. He had over 200 yards total himself. I mean, he feels like he is the league's MVP at this point here, especially now that A.J. McCarron is missing games with the injury. That's like an unfortunate kind of knocks you out of MVP running type of scenario there, which I do think that A.J. McCarron is somebody that if he's still playing is well in the conversation of. But with him being out now and no other clear front runner, it feels like it's Adrian Martinez's award to lose. And with him dishing the football out to 10 different receivers, and this is not the first time that we're seeing him just putting the football to everyone that is on that offense if he can. It feels like it's his award to win. And then on top of that, like the rest of the offense, man, the running back room is so deep in Birmingham. And CJ Marable, he's not there, he's not playing, he's not getting the ball handed off to him. Ricky Person and Larry Roundtree, doesn't even matter. They come in, 1-2 punch, very capable guys. They can run the football just as effectively, even if CJ Marable is not playing. And sure enough, behind one of the toughest O-lines in the UFL, you're still finding success on the ground, pushing for well over 100 yards rushing, as you do typically week in and week out. Birmingham, even when they're slipping up, is finding ways to win, and it's so impressive to watch. It really is. So, as I've been saying, I really have no idea how or who is going to knock off Birmingham come that UFL championship. I'm assuming Michigan will give them a run for their money as they did the first time around, but I don't want to sound like I'm talking down on Michigan, but I'm going to have a hard time believing that they're going to beat them in that USFL championship side of things. So we'll see. We'll see. I hope that maybe in the next couple of weeks, Michigan maybe changes my mind a bit and makes me feel like it'll be even closer than I'm anticipating. But it feels like Birmingham's running away with this right now. And it doesn't even matter if they're having bad games. They're still being incredible in the process. And again, I'm not a Birmingham fan. I know I wore a Birmingham shirt the other day, and I sound like I am the way I gush over them, but I just appreciate really good football when I'm watching it, and Birmingham is basically pumping out really good football week in and week out, and it's hard not to enjoy what they're doing. But those are my power rankings following week number 8, heading into week number 9. Again, I invite you all, comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts and opinions on this past week. What are your power rankings, thoughts on mine? But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.